Imagine standing in a crowded New York City street, surrounded by protesters, when a glass jar packed with the mother of Satan explosive sails through the air.
It's an absolutely terrifying thought.
Yeah, completely. Welcome to your custom-tailored deep dive. We're taking a massive stack of recent news reports, federal court documents, and historical terrorism databases, and we're just distilling them down so you can understand exactly what happened in New York City on Saturday, March 7, 2026.
Right.
This is the story of two teenagers from suburban Pennsylvania, a foiled ISIS-inspired bombing outside Gracie Mansion, and really the changing landscape of domestic security.
And the details of this thwarted attack are, they're incredibly intense. We're going to explore the minute-by-minute timeline of that Saturday afternoon outside the residence of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, that timeline is wild.
It really is. We'll also analyze the highly volatile chemical explosives used by the suspects, dig into the chilling motives driving these young men, and, place this entire event into the broader century-long history of terrorism in New York City. There is just a massive amount of crucial information to unpack here.
There definitely is. But before we break down that timeline, I do need to share a quick but absolutely vital disclaimer with you.
Yeah, this is important.
Right. The sources we're diving into today contain some deeply politically charged context. The attempted bombing took place during a chaotic scene of dueling protests.
Right.
One side featured an anti-Islam demonstration, and that was led by pardoned January 6th rioter Jake Lang. And the other side consisted of a large group of counter-protesters.
Exactly.
And we want to make it crystal clear to you that we are not taking any sides here. We're not endorsing any viewpoints from the right, the left, or anyone involved in those protests. Our sole mission is to strictly and impartially report the factual events exactly as they are detailed in the official source material.
Yeah. Presenting the unfiltered facts of the case is our only objective today. The political backdrop simply provides the setting for where this terrifying security incident unfolded.
Right. So let's look at that setting and jump straight into the scene at Gracie Mansion. It's a Saturday afternoon. The streets outside the mayor's residence are packed. The crowd is loud, the energy is completely frantic, and you have these two opposing protest groups basically screaming at each other.
It's a powder keg even before anything happens.
Exactly. Law enforcement is already on the scene trying to manage the crowds and maintain a physical barrier between the groups. Then, out of nowhere, the situation escalates from a tense protest into a literal nightmare.
The timeline accelerates in a matter of seconds. According to the sworn police reports and multiple witness accounts, an 18-year-old named Emir Balat steps out from the crowd.
Just a teenager?
Yeah, just an 18-year-old kid. He pulls out a homemade explosive device, produces a lighter, and ignites a hobby fuse attached to the top of it.
He lights the fuse right in the middle of a screaming crowd and just hurls it.
Yeah.
Witnesses describe seeing the device sailing through the air, leaving a visible trail of smoke and flames directly behind it as it flew toward the mass of protesters. I mean, it's the kind of image you usually only see in a war zone, not on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
No, not at all.
But then, an unbelievable stroke of luck changes the entire outcome of the day.
It really does. The device strikes a physical barrier set up by the police, and the sheer force of that impact somehow snuffs out the burning fuse.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the device drops to the pavement and sits there, entirely extinguished, just a few feet away from a group of responding NYPD officers. 0 injuries. Nobody gets hurt by that first throw.
But the crazy thing is, Balat doesn't just give up and run away when he sees the bomb fail. He instantly pivots.
Right.
He turns to the person standing next to him, a 19-year-old named Ibrahim Kayumi, and grabs a second explosive device right out of Kayumi's hands.
And Balat strikes the lighter again. He ignites the second device and drops it onto the pavement right near the officers who are rushing toward him.
Just drops it.
Yeah, and the moment the device hits the ground, Balat turns and attempts to flee the scene by sprinting and vaulting over a police barricade.
And this is where the story shifts from chaos to just incredible bravery. When you see a smoking explosive device hit the ground, human instinct tells you to run in the opposite direction.
Of course.
The NYPD officers on the scene did the exact opposite.
They charged directly at the threat. Local law enforcement's response was nothing short of heroic. NYPD Chief Aaron Edwards vaulted over a barrier, completely ignoring the burning device, and physically tackled Balat to the ground to stop him from escaping.
Wow.
Yeah. And Spint Luis Navarro was right there alongside him, securing the area and the suspects. The city officially honored both of these men for their actions, recognizing that their split-second decisions thwarted what could have easily become a mass casualty event.
So they secure the scene, they arrest the two teenagers, and call in the bomb squad to handle the devices on the street. And that immediately raises a massive question for you as you're listening. What exactly were these weapons?
Yeah.
The initial reports threw around a lot of different terms, but the police commissioner eventually confirmed we were looking at fully functional, improvised explosive devices. Could you explain exactly what these devices were?
Absolutely. These were sophisticated weapons designed for maximum carnage. Picture a standard glass mason jar, the kind you might use for canning vegetables, but wrapped entirely in thick layers of black duct tape.
Okay.
They were roughly the size of a football, but the most devastating feature was the shrapnel. The outside of these jars was densely packed with heavy metal hardware, specifically nuts, bolts, and screws.
So the jar itself is just a delivery system. The metal hardware is there to act as projectiles.
Exactly.
When the explosive goes off, all those heavy metal pieces shoot outward in every direction at supersonic speeds.
That is the deliberate, brutal design of a fragmentation weapon. It's meant to rip through a crowd and maximize severe injuries or fatalities. But a mason jar full of screws needs a powerful propellant to actually explode. What's fascinating here is the specific chemical component the suspects chose to use.
What was it?
Preliminary tests by the FBI confirmed the devices contained triacetone triperoxide.
Triacetone triperoxide. I know that chemical has a terrifying reputation in the counterterrorism world. They call it the mother of Satan.
They do. It earns that dark nickname because of its extreme volatility. Triacetone triperoxide, or TATP, doesn't behave like commercial explosives.
How so?
You don't need a complex detonator to set it off. A tiny spark, a minor physical shock, or even just the friction of the crystals rubbing together can trigger a massive, catastrophic detonation.
Just friction. That is terrifying.
Yes. Terrorist organizations across the globe have used it in multiple high-profile attacks over the past decade because, horrifyingly, you can manufacture it using common, easily accessible chemicals.
Now, I remember reading something in the initial reports about investigators finding a car tied to the suspects. Did they find more of this volatile explosive hidden somewhere near Gracie Mansion?
They located a vehicle parked just a few blocks away from the protest site. It was registered to one of Balat's relatives. They found a third suspicious device inside the car. The bomb squad locked down the area and tested it, and thankfully, that third device tested negative for explosives. However, the other items discovered inside the vehicle really broke the investigation wide open.
What else did they leave in the car?
Investigators pulled out a metal can, an extra length of hobby fuse, and the smoking gun of the entire case, a handwritten recipe for manufacturing TATP.
A recipe.
Yeah. The shopping list on that piece of paper included hydrogen peroxide, sulfuric acid, and acetone.
So they literally had the instruction manual sitting in the car. That proves this wasn't some impulsive act. They bought the chemicals, followed the recipe, and built the weapons.
Exactly.
And finding that car led the FBI straight back to where these two teenagers lived in Pennsylvania.
Right. The federal response mobilized incredibly fast. By late Monday night into Tuesday morning, heavily armed FBI agents and bomb technicians descended on a public storage facility located on South Flowers Mill Road.
Then where is that?
This is in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. It's a quiet suburb in Bucks County, right near the suspects' homes.
So the FBI arrives in full tactical gear, completely locking down the storage facility in the middle of the night. They open the unit and find explosive residue left behind from the bomb-making process.
And because TATP is so incredibly unstable, the bomb squad faced a massive problem. You can't just sweep up the residue, put it in a truck, and drive it to a secure lab.
Because of the friction?
Exactly. The simple friction of the truck driving down a bumpy road could cause the residue to detonate and kill the technicians.
That's insane.
So the heavily armed bomb squads had to conduct controlled detonations right there on the concrete outside the storage facility.
Just imagine living in that neighborhood. You're asleep in your bed in suburban Pennsylvania. It's 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and suddenly massive explosions shake your windows.
It had to be terrifying for the residents.
The local police had to flood social media with messages assuring the panicked public that the loud bangs were startling, but there was no active danger to the community.
Destroying evidence on site is a last resort. It paints a vivid picture of how seriously the federal government took this chemical threat. They were not willing to take a single chance with that residue.
So we have the weapons, we have the explosive residue, and we have the arrests. Let's look closely at the people behind this plot. You hear about weapons of mass destruction and handwritten chemical recipes, and you picture highly trained operatives. But we're talking about teenagers.
We are.
Emir Balat is an 18-year-old senior at Neshaminy High School. He hasn't even been inside a physical classroom since September 2025. He was entirely enrolled in a virtual learning program from his home.
And Ibrahim Kayumi is barely older. He's a 19-year-old who just graduated from Council Rock High School North in 2024.
Okay.
Both of these young men grew up in the quiet Philadelphia suburbs of Bucks County. They are United States citizens. They have no prior public criminal records. On paper, they look like perfectly average suburban kids.
The contrast between their quiet suburban lives and their actions on the streets of New York is jarring. Why did they do it? What pushes two teenagers to pack mason jars with shrapnel and throw them at police officers?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of global extremism, the motive becomes terrifyingly clear. Federal authorities immediately classified this as an ISIS-inspired terror plot.
ISIS-inspired.
Yes. Both suspects openly admitted to investigators that they were motivated by the Islamic State.
They didn't try to hide it at all. When the police were actively tackling Kayumi on the street outside Gracie Mansion, he was literally screaming the word ISIS.
Yeah.
He later sat down with investigators and freely admitted that he constantly watched ISIS propaganda videos on his phone and considered himself officially affiliated with the terrorist group.
And Balat's actions while in custody were equally direct. While sitting in the holding area of the police precinct shortly after his arrest, he requested a piece of paper. He wrote out a formal statement pledging his allegiance to the Islamic State, and then he signed his name at the bottom.
He just wrote it out right there in the precinct.
Right there. He wrote several additional statements expressing intense hostility toward non-believers, specifically concluding his writings with the phrase, "We take action."
They certainly tried to take action. There's a specific quote from the federal court complaint detailing Balat's interrogation that completely stopped me in my tracks.
The Boston Marathon quote.
Yes. The investigators are trying to gauge the scale of what Balat wanted to achieve. They ask him a direct question. Was his goal to accomplish something similar to the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing? Keep in mind, the Boston attack used homemade pressure cooker bombs, killed 3 people, and severely injured hundreds of others.
And Balat's response to that question gives you a raw look into a highly radicalized mind. He looks at the investigators and says, "No, even bigger." He then coldly notes that the Boston Marathon attack resulted in, quote, "only 3 deaths."
Only 3 deaths. And 18-year-old high school students expressing disappointment that a major domestic terror attack didn't murder a higher number of innocent people.
It's chilling.
It's incredibly difficult to process how someone reaches that level of detachment from human life.
It reveals a complete psychological disconnect, driven entirely by the propaganda they consumed. Because of these statements, the written pledges to ISIS, and the physical evidence of the TATP explosives, the federal justice system came down with maximum force.
No bail.
Exactly. Both young men were immediately denied bail. They are currently locked in federal custody, facing some of the most severe charges possible.
They're looking at federal charges, including attempted support to a designated foreign terrorist organization and the use of a weapon of mass destruction. These charges carry decades in federal prison.
The severity of the charges reflects the severity of the threat. This entire event raises critical questions about how terrorism is mutating. If we step back and look at the broader history of terrorism in New York City, this Gracie Mansion plot represents a very specific, dangerous shift in how attacks are planned and executed
is secretly
today.
funding
New York
the
City
government's
has
massive
tragically been a
spending
target
addiction.
for a very
It is
long time.
a pretty shocking
But this
realization
incident with
when you
2
actually look
teenagers
at the math.
feels
Right.
remarkably
Well,
different
imagine
from the
for a
major
second that
historical
you have
attacks
attacks
we
we
usually
usually
learn about.
It represents a
And,
complete tactical shift.
You
Look
swore to
back
your
at the
family,
timeline
hand
of
over
terror
heart,
in New York.
that
Over a
this money
century
was
ago, you
strictly
had the
for fixing a
1920
leaking
Wall
roof.
Street bombing.
Right. You said,
Suspected
if we
anarchists
don't fix
used a
this roof,
horse-drawn wagon
the
packed
house
with
is gonna
dynamite and
collapse.
heavy
It's an
iron weights
existential
acting as
crisis for the
shrapnel.
house.
Exactly.
That
It's the
massive
Save the House
blast
Fund.
killed
But
38
then,
people
your car
and injured
breaks down,
hundreds
you
right
spend a
in the
little too much
financial
on
district.
groceries.
Then you jump forward to the
piling up.
modern era,
So what
the
do?
1990s.
You raid the roof fund. The
You
1993
take that
World
money,
Trade
pay
Center
off your credit
bombing
cards,
involved
and
a
tell your
massive
family, hey,
network
don't
of
worry, we'll
terrorists
fix the
who
roof
rented a
later.
van,
Right.
loaded
And in
it with
this
a
scenario,
736
the roof
pound
is the
bomb,
planet,
and
or at least
detonated it in
Maryland's
the
climate
underground
goals.
parking
Mm.
garage. And the car is
6
a
people
massive,
died and over
self-inflicted
1,000 were injured.
$1.5
And, of course, the catastrophic
billion
September 11
state
attacks in
budget
2001.
deficit.
A completely
Al-Qaeda
avoidable
spent
deficit,
years
I might add.
planning a
Welcome to
globally
the deep
coordinated
dive.
strike
Today
They
we're
hijacked
exploring
commercial
a classic
airplanes and
case
flew
of
them into the
fiscal
Twin
sleight of
Towers,
hand
resulting
coming out
in
of Annapolis.
2,996
We're looking at the
deaths.
strategic
deadliest
energy
terrorist
investment
attack in
fund,
world history.
Yes.
the SAFE.
Heavily funded and
It's a
orchestrated
huge
from
pot of
overseas
money
training camps.
meant to save the
When you
environment.
look at those
But it's
historic
turning into a
tragedies,
hidden
the
tax
sheer
on
scale
every
of the
single
planning
person
is
paying an
overwhelming.
electric bill in
The Gracie
Maryland.
Mansion plot
It
is
really is.
horrifying,
It's become the center
but
of
the
a
methodology
huge
is
political fight.
entirely different.
You've
It
got
seems
a
to echo
Democratic
some of the more
governor,
recent close
frustrated
calls the city has
environmentalists
faced
making
over the
some very
last
awkward
decade.
compromises.
It definitely
and
places this
conservative
weekend's
critics
event
who are
into a
rightly calling
distinct
this whole thing
category
a
of
shell game.
isolated,
shell game.
thwarted bombings.
And when you look at the documents
it
we have
closely
today,
mirrors the
reports,
May
budget
2010
proposals,
Times Square
critiques from Senate
car bomb
Republicans,
attempt.
I
it is
remember that.
really
In
hard
that
to
incident,
unsee it.
an
Our mission for
individual
this deep
packed
dive
an
is
SUV
simple.
with
Follow the
explosives,
money.
parked it in the middle of
Always
Times
follow the
Square,
money.
but
We are
the
going to
device
see
failed
how
to
a
detonate
fund
properly
designed
and
to
was
fight
safely
climate
disarmed
change
by the
is
bomb
being used to
squad.
plug
It
holes
all
in the
strongly
state budget.
reminds me of the December
And we'll dig into the
2017
argument
incident.
that this isn't
An
found money at
ISIS-inspired
all.
attacker
This is
built a
essentially a
homemade pipe
backdoor
bomb
tax
strapped
on
it to his
families.
body and
Let's
tried to
get right
detonate
into
it
it.
in a
The
crowded
Strategic
subway
Energy
passageway near
Investment
Times
Fund.
Sounds very
Yes.
official.
The weapon
very important.
malfunctioned,
What does
and
it
the attacker
actually do?
mostly
Well,
just
injured
on
himself
paper,
and 4
it
pedestrians.
is the state's
All of
green
these recent
piggy bank.
failed plots
The SIF
shed a
is
common
managed by
thread,
the Maryland
pointing to a
Energy
brand new
Administration.
paradigm
Its whole
in
stated
domestic
purpose
security.
is to reduce energy
Rebecca
bills,
Weiner,
cut
the
waste,
head of the
and fund
NYPD's
renewable
counterterrorism
energy
program,
Like solar
provided some
panels and
vital
efficiency
analysis
upgrades.
on why this
Exactly.
specific
But
Gracie
here is the
Mansion
real
plot
aha moment
matters
of the
so much
story.
for the future of law enforcement.
Where does
She
the money
emphasized that
actually
we are witnessing a
come from?
major shift
Because
away
they
from
aren't
the
just
9/11
taxing you
model.
directly for it.
We are no longer
No, and that's
solely
why
focused
politicians
on large,
absolutely
highly
love it. It
orchestrated
feels free.
plots.
So about
planned by
40% comes from
international
regional
networks
carbon
overseas.
auctions.
The new threat is
But the
increasingly
big
domestic.
chunk, the
Right,
one growing like
domestic,
crazy,
incredibly
comes from something
isolated
called
and coming from
alternative
younger and
compliance
younger
payments.
individuals.
Counterterrorism
ACPs.
experts call
Which is
this
just a fancy government term for a
self-radicalization.
fine.
Right.
These are
It's a fine for
teenagers who
failure.
consume
Let me break
a
it
steady
down.
diet of
Maryland
extremist
law forces
propaganda
utility
through social
companies
media
to buy a
algorithms.
certain amount of
They
green
isolate
energy.
themselves in
They have
virtual
proved they're using
communities,
renewables.
communicating
But they
in
can't find that
encrypted
green
group
energy,
chats
or
that
if it's
authorities
just way too
cannot
expensive
easily
on the market.
monitor.
They are
Which
flying
it
over.
usually is.
Exactly.
Yeah, the state
They
gives
never
them an
travel to
escape
physical
hatch.
training camps
The
in the Middle
utility
East.
can just pay a
They
fee
simply
directly
look up
to the state
instructions on the
instead.
open
That
internet,
fee
buy
is the
household
ACP.
chemicals from a
And
local
here's the
hardware
kicker.
store, and learn
Utilities
how to
are
build highly volatile
increasingly just
TATP
paying the
bombs
fine
right
because
in
it's
their
cheaper than
suburban
actually
bedrooms.
buying the
That
green
is the
energy.
detail that truly shakes you.
The climate
The
fund is
barrier
getting
to entry for
incredibly
building a weapon
rich.
of mass destruction
Precisely
has practically
because
disappeared.
The green energy
You don't need a
mandates are failing.
massive terror
Precisely.
network,
It is a
international funding,
completely
or
perverse
specialized military
incentive.
training anymore.
The government
You
made the
just need a
mandates so
smartphone,
aggressive and the
an
market
internet
is so
connection,
distorted
and
that power
absolute
companies are just writing
determination.
checks to the state
It makes the
instead of
job
going
of law
green.
And the
enforcement
stats on this are
infinitely
just
more difficult.
staggering.
They are.
Intelligence agencies are no longer
2022,
just
this
tracking
revenue was
international
$77
flights or
million.
wiretapping
By
known leaders of
2025,
terrorist
it jumped to
organizations.
$365
They are now tasked with trying to find a
million.
completely
Wow, from
unknown
77
teenager
million to
enrolled in a
365
virtual high
million
school
in 3
program.
years.
Right, so
who
now
is
the state
quietly
has
buying
this hydrogen
massive
peroxide and mason
accidental pot
jars
of
on a
gold.
Tuesday
It's
afternoon.
supposedly for
So
green
what does this all
projects.
mean for you,
But
the
remember,
listener?
that money didn't
It's
just fall
completely
out of the
natural to
sky.
hear a
The
detailed
utility
breakdown of a
companies
story
paid
like
those
this and
fines.
feel a deep sense of
And do you
alarm.
think those
The
massive
reality that
corporations
deadly
just eat that
shrapnel-filled
cost out of the goodness of
explosives
their
were
hearts?
thrown onto a
Oh,
crowded
absolutely
street
not.
in a
They
major
pass
American
every
city
single
by
penny of
two
that onto the
teenagers
customer.
Exactly.
is
It shows up
objectively
right on your
terrifying.
electric bill.
It is.
So you,
But while the
the
threat
everyday
is alarming,
ratepayer,
there is a
are
profoundly
paying for the
positive
utility's
takeaway
failure
hidden
to
within the
meet a
chaos
government
of that
mandate.
Saturday afternoon.
The
Tell me
state
about
collects
that.
your money.
This story
drops it in the
highlights
safe
the
and says,
absolute
"Look at all this
undeniable
cash we have for the
effectiveness of
climate."
vigilant
Which brings
law
us to the
enforcement.
raid.
The
Because
NYPD
that money is
officers on the
definitely
ground
not
did not
staying in the
hesitate
climate
for a
fund.
fraction
Not
of a
anymore.
second.
Enter
They
Governor
ran
Wes
directly
Moore.
toward the danger.
His
tackled the
administration is staring
suspects,
down a
secured the
projected
lethal devices,
$1.5
and prevented
billion
any loss
budget
of life.
deficit.
That's a great point.
And furthermore, the
1.5
FBI
billion.
mobilized immediately,
just ignore a
tracking the
hole that
suspect's
deep.
digital
You can't.
footprints,
And
locating
when
the
government
vehicle,
overspends
and
to that
safely
degree,
disposing
they
of the
start checking under
explosive
the couch
materials in the
cushions
middle of
for
the
loose
night
change.
before anyone else could be
Except here,
harmed.
the couch
It
cushion
serves
is
as a
the green
stark,
energy fund,
unforgettable
and the
reminder
loose change
of how
is hundreds of
rapidly
millions of
online
taxpayer
rhetoric and
dollars.
digital
So
extremism extremism
actual proposal?
can
How much are
manifest
they
into
taking?
very
The
real
governor's plan
physical
diverts
threats in our public squares.
$292 million
The internet allows
directly
hate
from the
and
safe
radical
into the
ideology
state's
to
general
spread
fund.
faster
Just to balance the
than at
books.
any other
Just to
point
cover
in
their
human history.
overspending.
Without a doubt.
They
But this
are
event also
using
proves
energy
that when
fines
everyday
to pay
citizens
for
remain
general
vigilant
government
and
operations.
highly trained professionals act with
Bureaucracy,
courage,
salaries,
these
office
plots can be
supplies, you name
dismantled
it.
before
But that's not even
tragedy
all of
strikes
it.
our
Yeah.
community. I read in the
Before we
sources
wrap up
there's
our
also a
analysis today,
rebate
I want to
scheme.
leave you with a
Yes,
final
this is the part
lingering
critics are
question
calling
to
a
political
ponder on your
sweetener.
own.
Okay, let's hear
They're
it.
grabbing
If
another
teenagers can learn to
$100
build
million
weapons of mass
out of the
destruction from their
fund to give a
smartphones while sitting in their
one-time
quiet suburban
$40
bedrooms,
rebate to eligible
how do we
households.
balance the absolute
$40.
freedom of the
$40.
internet
So let me get this straight.
with the physical
the state
safety of our
mandates drive up
streets?
energy
That
costs.
is a remarkably heavy
The utility
question,
companies
and it's a
pass those
challenge our
massive
society
costs
will
to
have
you
to
and
grapple
me.
with every
Our
single
bills
day
go up
as
by
technology
hundreds of
continues
dollars
to
a
evolve.
year.
Thank you so
And
much
then the
for joining
governor
us on
takes
this
a chunk
deep
of our
dive
own
into the
money,
source material.
hands us back a
We
crisp
appreciate you taking the
$40
time
bill,
to understand the
and
facts
basically
behind the headlines.
says, "You're
stay
welcome."
curious,
That is
stay
the
informed,
exact math.
and we'll
It's
catch
wild.
you
And
on
if
the
you look
next
at the
deep
recent
dive.
supplemental